So to make myself clear, I think we've now had very different presentations from psychologists, from sociology, and then more, statistics, and from a think tank. And what they have presented here is both the picture of Sweden, how does Sweden look like, what does the UN Declaration of Human Rights and Children's Rights say, what are the basic needs of children, and it's a complex picture. So maybe you would like to give a brief comment first on the discussion. Maybe Monica, you start your summary.
I don't think I could is it working? I don't think I could summarize it, because as you say, it's been very diverse or covering wide perspectives. But maybe I could give a comment, because I looked up the organization's website today, and I see there that you want to encourage all different kinds of child upbringing. And I think this is a very good aspiration. And you said, Jonas, that we are not, what did you say? We are not arguing to take away daycare. So for me then, a good strategy would be to say, okay, how can we support the parents who want to have their children in daycare? Yeah. And then, so how can daycare be improved? What are our good suggestions? I absolutely am in favor of adding up criticism, but we also we have to avoid that this just comes back to create more bad conscience of parents who depend on kindergarten. So for me, one strategy would be, yes, we support different kinds of childcare facilities. How can förskola, what do you call them, be improved? How can we call them improved? And the second point would be then, as you do argue, and you are good, Jonas, how can we facilitate variation, different choices? And my third point here would be, how can we advocate the view upon the importance of the family? And the final one, so I'm not going to give another lecture. What about you, young people, taking up the fight that we lost on 6 hours working day? We are so upset about people leaving their children in daycare for 50 hours, so am I. But how are we going to give them another opportunity? So I encourage you to pick up an old demand of my generation of feminists, 6 hours working day, which may give them a real choice. So this is just some suggestions, further discussions and policy. Thank you.
So
you can have mine.
I use yours.
It's not mine, so yes.
So this is this is very interesting, since we're talking about utopia. Let me throw out my own ideas. First of all, an observation that as far as a family, people, the Swedish people who went to Minnesota, and so it froze Sweden at, when was that? But it froze Sweden 2 generations, 3 generations ago. And I got to know many of them are probably the most family people I have ever met on the universe. So I want to say that there was something here that was phenomenal. I also want to say that the vision of the Swedish in terms of the construct of utopia, a social utopia, was amazing. But if you look at all the utopian literature, it did not have to do with children, it had to do with adults. Now, given that, I'm just going to be mischievous and suggest starting it, utopia, from a different place. I'm going to suggest that if it was possible to educate Swedish parents in a very simple idea that children need to be taken care of by an adult they are attached to and is attached to by them, or is attached to the child, that is where care takes place, where outcomes takes place, where a child can flourish. That education, and then let it to the parents to solve the problem, I think you would find amazing results as a new utopia would evolve, but a utopia that started around the basic needs of a child rather than the basic vision of an adult in terms of the relating to each other. But what I'm suggesting to you is that it couldn't come from the government because it can't be done, but putting that knowledge in the hearts and minds of parents that this was required. They would need to look at their options, see if they could solve problems with regards to their options, figure out the work-care balance with that, keeping in mind that children need to be attached to those who take care of them, and then something would evolve from that. And the something that would evolve would be much closer to providing the conditions that are required for a flourishing child. An idea.
Yes, that's great. Any comments from you here?
Someone said to me that what Sweden needs nowadays is a war. It's strange with this country. The state governs very much of what people should do. But talking about politics and the threat of being attacked, we say that Finland is between us and the big enemy, Russia. So talking about taking care of the whole country, we give away the responsibility. It's very strange.
I would like to make some points or comments on children's rights. So I liked it very much when you started your presentation with saying basically that children's rights should realize through the parents. That is a very fundamental point which is seldom mentioned, sorry to say. So there is one particular aspect which you touched upon close to the end of your presentation, that is the children's right in the family. Now that is a very strange thing from my point of view, because in my understanding a family is a community of love. And I think that in a community of love there are no rights. There are duties and there are responsibilities. If I have rights, then this means that whatever you think and whatever you say, I will do that. And I think that is not the right approach in a family. So if we speak about children's rights within the family, then we are not on the right way. The other point is non-violence. Now, being a mathematician, I would immediately ask a definition for violence. Does non-violence mean lack of punishment? That seems to be a bit exaggerated, I think. If non-violence means no corporal punishment, then what I can say is that I have experienced several cases with my children and children in other families when the child says, please mom, please dad, spankle me, but don't take away that toy from me for a week, or don't do it that you will not speak to me for a day. So, especially the last, not speaking, not dealing with the child for some time, that is quite often done by parents. And that can be more violent from the point of view of the child. So of course, beating a child up very heavily is very, very bad. But just touching the child a bit stronger, which definitely makes no harm, it can be much better from the point of view of the child than several other punishments.
Any comments from you on that one?
From me?
Yeah, or,
Yes, absolutely. I can also wait for a while, but I will
yeah.
comment on that, yeah.
To make a comment. I mean,
Yeah.
when we discuss this about taking home care, I think it's difficult to get the Swedish perspective, because I think, the HARO organization is formed because the one thing that was taken away was the ability for home care. And that is kind of like the place where it hurts the most. It's a big thing to reform our daycare system, but it's very difficult to discuss this before we actually made it possible for parents to choose the care and got on a message about that. I think that's something that has to come first. Swedish parents need to feel on the inside that this is my choice to do it for my children in my way. And I think actually more important than what care is chosen is that it's a parental decision. Now there's such a lot of emotion involved when we discuss this, because parents feel, I didn't make my own decision, it was made for me. That's when I compare to Finland and see that some people use home care, some people use daycare, but there's not a conflict, because every parent feels it was my choice. I made this choice for my child in my life situation to make it work for me. And I think that's the first place we need to come to, where this is taken away from being a state choice to being a family choice. And families being encouraged to make this choice from their living situation and from the needs of their child. I think that's kind of why the emphasis lies in that from a Swedish perspective.
I really liked both of your points. It doesn't make any difference, does it? Does it make a difference? Okay. But I forget your first point. But I liked it. Do you remember your first point that you just made?
Yes, it was about the right of the child in the family.
Oh, through the parents. Yes. And that is so important, is not to put, and I talked to Mona about this too, it's so important. And as well, the idea that in a family, when you talk about rights, you don't take care of a child because they have a right to, if that's the idea, or demand it. That's not love. And so it's responsibilities, it's generosity, it's providing more than is. And so there's one thing for us to know what children need and what their needs are, and that is huge. And to me, that is much more a challenge of education than legislation. And secondly, I like the point that you made, and I also made this to Mona in a conversation, is a mistake that I felt has been made, and I'm only familiar with the way it's been done in North America, is that that violence and spanking became synonymous. And so that spanking was considered violence, and then with the legislation of non-violence, that it led to all kinds of apprehension of children from immigrant groups and religious groups to whom that was a practice that was inherent in them, and not necessarily violent. And this is what I spoke to yesterday, the importance of understanding human adaptation. there's always been, this is so fundamental, is that when children encounter futility and they feel it, it brings them to tears. It's understandable that certain cultures and traditions have taken shortcuts with this intuitive instinct that children need to cry. They took shortcuts to this. There are certainly more civilized ways, and that become us, and certainly that would be true, but that needs to be educated, not legislated. And if it was educated, and instead of taking it away, we put into parents' understandings, yes, the sadness and tears are disappointed. Yes, you must be able to say no to your child. Yes, there are limits and there are restrictions. And yes, the child needs to feel sad about that for adaptation to occur. And there are much better ways of doing this than spanking your child. And I think with that, but that to me again would be an issue of education, not legislation. And because when it's an issue of legislation, it leads to very, very bad implementation. And what I agree with you on is, and of course, which is my whole theme, is the greatest impact upon children is facing separation. And to replace spanking with timeouts was leaping from the fire pan or the frying pan into the fire. It actually took it to the place, and all the research supports that isolation has the most impact of all. And so it comes to the fundamental violation of what children need. So the irony is that we defend the children's rights by laws against violence, and move to violate even more with our replacement things of what children need. It wasn't informed, developmentally informed.
Yes. First,
It just makes you feel better.
I think that it might be a good idea to put more emphasis, as you did, Jonas, on the fact that you want more choices. Because if it comes to too negative perspective on förskola, only if that's too much emphasized, it may antagonize the debate and not create a dialogue. I totally support Ulla in demanding research. And whenever we put into a new measure into policy, as a researcher, I'm looking for positive, unexpected effects and negative. So I'm very open. I'm absolutely in favor, after having listened to you here, that you have to research what's happening. But so for me then, there is this first more choices, but also supporting and looking for how can those who want to have children or have to in kindergartens, how can we make them better? But also then the choices. And then to you, I agree, I absolutely take the criticism of not providing a definition. The Council of Europe has that. I'm not sure if I'm going to look that up. And it defines physical violence and psychological violence. And of course, absolutely replacing, I'm not putting, by arguing for a non-violent upbringing, I'm not saying start psychological punishment. Absolutely not. And I will certainly make that clearer in my next presentation. But I think maybe I have a more positive view upon rights. And this is difficult maybe to express in just a few minutes. Maybe I also do not want this very strong division between family and public. You know, when we had this research on abuse of women in the 70s, it was a lot happened because it was this strict, you know, what happened in the family was closed for the public. So for me, it's more interest. I absolutely share, and I do hope that I expressed worries concerning how rights are implemented. This is a concern of mine. How are they implemented? And I hope I have expressed this concern. But I'm not so worried that, like you are, or I have a more positive attitude also towards legislation, actually. I'm in favor of legislation in order also to indicate what society accepts and what it does not accept. Yes, and what else? There was another point, but maybe I will have the opportunity once more. But yeah, can I just say one thing? When you told me about Sweden, I get a little bit sad to hear you criticize so analytic or so ensidigt. One way, the Swedish society, you say, maybe we need a war. It really, I understand that you're worried. I share some of your worries. But I have to tell you that
they were not my words.
No.
It just suggests that we are a people of a lot of anger that never come true.
Yeah.
We are so angry here, but we mustn't be. It's forbidden. Anger is the most forbidden feeling in Sweden.
I will take a break and come back later.
Just to answer two more here. I think this is an international conference.
Yes.
This is not a presentation I would have to the Swedish public or even to the Swedish government. This is an international conference, and the purpose that I had here was, first of all, to give a message to other countries that this might not be a model to anybody. Then it is true that in Sweden we need some of these criticism too. And that is because when we say that we want more choices, they say no, daycare is the best. That's the argument we're being answered with. It's very difficult, I think, it seems, even from Norway, from Brussels, to understand the nature of the debate in Sweden. HARO has worked for this issue for 30 years. It started off with intuitive mothers who felt it must be better for a home care, or at least I want to have that for my children. It's gone years and years and years, and they managed in the mid-1990s to get a home care allowance of 200 euros per month that lasted for about 1 year. At that time it was used, I think, by 60 or 70% of all mothers for that period. Then you got another government which took it away. And they went back and worked again and again to try to push this through. And 8 years ago they elected a government who, under a lot of opposition, finally agreed to do it, and they limited as much as they could, and now it's gone again. And the argument used is always that daycare is good for children, and it is good for gender equality. So the argument needs to be, no, not always that, but we are more mild in our discussion when we have it in Sweden. So my purpose here was not to try to change Sweden, but rather to give the information to the rest of the world that you might not want to emulate this model directly.
Just a comment on that. I think it's really easy in this kind of debate that we rise a conflict between groups of parents, like the parents that choose to have the children in daycare, and the parents that want to stay more at home. I don't really think that there is a conflict. I think it more like you do, like Nufel, that it's a matter of knowing the needs of your child, of really having the choice to make the choices you would like to make, and to see opportunities. Because once you have the knowledge of the needs of a child, I think the demand of various opportunities will come as well, and with the demand, creativity and other ways of doing this. So I think if these two groups of parents could meet, and without getting into guilt and accusations, I think we could create something wonderful. But we very often get stuck in this debate, only talking about, policies or agendas and everything that is pushed upon parents from the public. But once we start to see the debate from the point of view of the children, and those who are closest to the children, every parent loves their child, no matter what choice they make, then I think we will have a more healthy debate and get some more constructive solutions. So there's just a comment from me. So if there are anyone else, any questions?
Yes, I love your speak, Jonas. I think it's very important to tell this, even that we know that, I know everything, that I think it's good to have it, that it's like that in Sweden. Because we notice that when we visit school, or I've been a teacher for 10 years and I've seen how everything changes. And there is also one more thing, it's very important to take the child's perspective. I think that's the key. Because in Sweden we talk about the adults' rights every time. And I think we who are parents now, we are very spoiled. We are spoiled. And I think there is some friends of me that I have to have my own time when I'm not with my kids, and I have to do my interests and everything. But I think we should try to get them to understand how few years they have with their child, and how important that is. Yes, and there is, because we are so spoiled and we want to do our free things that we like to do in free time. I think there's a problem, and to raise a kid, it was a big effort. it demands a lot of you, and as it is now, when 95% of the children is in daycare, many people think, oh, it's good, and then I can have my own time, and I don't have to work so much with the children. So I think there is a big problem, because there is when you are in your adult environment, it's another thing than to be with your child, and you have to give a lot of yourself to the child, and I think that's a problem in our society, that you are spoiled.
I would like to just underscore what you said and add to the idea that I am convinced, after putting all the pieces together, since from a developmental perspective, parenting is our developmental destiny, that if you actually look at it, becoming the parent a child needs is also the opportunity for our own growth and our own fulfillment. It doesn't compete with it. It is the natural developmental answer. It's not a backdrop. It is the essential one. There is no job, there is no amount of fame that I could experience, the number of books that I could read, that can ever match the sense of fulfilling dance with my grandchild, with my child. And it is the fulfillment. And when I experience that, it helps me not seek for, to put me in perspective. Because we are creatures of attachment, and this was our developmental destiny. And it doesn't take away from us. It adds to us. It enriches us. It gives us a second opportunity to grow up. And that's a good thing, because there's nothing that more stretches us than becoming the parent our child needs.
Thank you. Mona?
Yes, it's we're coming to the end of the conference, and it's, to my opinion, a good thing to focus also on what we agree on, and I pick up on your point that children's rights should be the starting point. But of course, this is debated. What are the best interests of the child? What are their rights? What are their needs? This is debated. And therefore, the second point is then, how can we create a constructive dialogue that really brings us forward in elaborating these diverse alternatives and supporting parents. So for me, the way that we create a constructive dialogue is very important. And I agree with you, or not agree, but I mean, you say we are angry, then it's incredibly important to find ways to express this anger and to create it into a good politics or debate. So, anger, when I hear you saying that you're angry, then of course I become very concerned about how can this be facilitated into a constructive dialogue. And I couldn't agree more than what you say about being the fulfillment of being a parent and a grandparent, even though we have to remember that not all people have that privilege. So people also have to look for other kind of privileges or fulfillments, but for me, I totally agree with you. And Norwegian feminists, we have never wanted to liberate mothers from the mother instinct. I cannot remember that. That was. How could we come up with such an idea? I hope you see that my head is standing up. You know, this is no. We wanted those of us who had the luck. We wanted to be mothers. We wanted to be good mothers. We are trying to be good mothers, and we are learning to be grandmothers. And I will also encourage you to. Naming and shaming. I understand that the feminists in Sweden are acting in ways that upset you, but instead of just making feminist a negative, with a negative connotation, I would encourage you to be precise. What are you criticizing feminists for? Because otherwise, again, the debate might be antagonized and not fruitful. And of course, I am a feminist. I'm proud to call myself a feminist. And for me, this means we were fighting for maternity leaves, we were fighting for also at that time kindergartens, and we were valuing unpaid work, for example. This was a big issue for us, and still is. And many things that I think you appreciate. So therefore, instead of creating antagonism, be precise. What is it? And if feminists in Sweden do not want to look into the practices in förskolan, that is really sad. But it's much better, and I think you will have better results if this is what you criticize them for. Say, you have to face reality. Things are not the way you thought it should be. Do you understand that? Because if you just say that feminism, what do you have against us? For me, I had a very useful talk with Ulla yesterday. And I understood more of the debate, and I think so I will just urge you, be concrete, be precise, then the debate move ahead.
Thank you. Jokes.
I just want to underscore what both Gordon and Mona said here about parenthood being something developmental. And if you've heard what I mentioned at the beginning about management consultants being obsessed with human potential but not really knowing it, I would say they forgot to be parents, and if they were parents, they forgot about parenthood. And I've done a lot of personal growth courses and things before I became a parent, and it's like nothing compared to being a parent. And it seems to me truly that one of the values of family is not only for the children, it's equal much for the parents to mature to their full potential and healing whatever didn't get healed when they were small. So yeah, I just want to underscore that. This is two things. It's both children and it's parents.
So here for families.
Yeah, that's
This is a big debate, but just one tiny example. Just the other day, there was an article scoring very high rate on Svenska Dagbladet by a famous journalist, feminist journalist, and she said, the title was Hur vågar svenska familjer, eller hur har svenska familjer mage att vilja välja själva? How dare Swedish families demand the right to choose for themselves? And her argument was that the state provides the money, therefore the state should decide who should be at home for how long and so forth. So that is my critique. Feminism stole motherhood, the right to choose. Feminism does not empower me as a woman and a mother to be good, to feel like I am empowered to handle my children. That's my critique. Thank you.
No, I had more a question. come to you, Jonas, because I was curious when you said that you presented this in this way because of the foreign public or so that we're mixed here. I'm so curious to hear, like, what does the Swedish politics say, or what access do you have to the political arena here or to places? Because I'm a social worker, I've worked with children, and I'm working now very focused on family, but I still feel a lot of what we have discussed here missed in my education and in the arenas that I've been earlier. So I'm curious, like, what is the access you have to the Swedish society and the different arenas?
I've been lucky. I've been able to speak in the Swedish Parliament. Through HARO and other organizations, I've met individually with members of Parliament. And when you do that, that typically results in a very good discussion, where they typically understand pretty well the point you're making and the seriousness of it. It's not really difficult having that dialogue at all. But then it's obvious that the political realities, which I think again is very hard to understand, maybe even in Norway, in Sweden, is such that they will never say the words. You will hear them the next day something, say something completely contrary to it because of the Swedish political climate. And it is very heated in that way, and it's very difficult to get something through, especially in the media. It is not difficult to talk to individual politicians, but it seems like somebody said that our media is in a way trying to educate the population in the right values, rather than actually questioning what is going on. So I think there is something, and I understand your anger, because I think there's a frustration in Sweden in general. And I mean, the causes are way beyond what we can discuss here, but I think there is a connection to family here. There's a frustration that we're not able to talk about the important things in Swedish media. And I think, we have tried in very many different ways, in quite eloquent ways, to discuss this. And I think there are also voices in Sweden who are maybe not really seeking a dialogue. And I understand them too, because if you've written article and article and article, and no one listens to you, people are going to raise their voices. It's going to come out more and more in that. So I think it's yes, we have access, but it seems like there's a political culture which doesn't mean. There are several members of Parliament who have listened to Gordon, who's read his book, who know very well of the HARO's work and all those things, and they are trying, but when it comes to the political reality and the TV or the companies put a microphone under them, they'll say something different often.
I think we actually have to end our discussion, but since this is a celebration of a family, I think the summary of this would be that let's go on and take this message to the families, to the parents, focus on the children, and let us continue to have a discussion with one another and try to. Because I think every parent in this country, in spite of all the politicians and the journalists never wanting to publish different articles and the lack of public debate, I think the parents and the teachers, those working and being close to the children, they understand. And if we just continue to encourage each other, we will have a change. Somehow we will have a change. So, thank you all for coming, and just have something, a little present to you all for being so kind. Just a little tiny, it's always hard in the mic. I put away the mic.
Well, and thanks to HARO for giving us this invitation to celebrate family. And I think whatever has been said, the one thing that's in common that we have is the support of the family. And we're all together on that. And so it's finding our way to know, yes, that we must do what we can to preserve family, celebrate it, and enjoy it.